Forging Damascus is awesome. However, it can also be quite challenging at times. But that's what I'm here to help you with. Hi, I'm Ian Zimmerman. I am a professional metalsmith for the past 4.5 years, and here is my experience with Damascus. Have you ever been forging a Damascus steel billet, spending night and day, hours and hours on it, and then once you get to the final step, it breaks apart on you? You had an unsuccessful weld. I've had this happen to me countless of times, ruining hundreds of dollars of steel, all because I simply neglected the things I mentioned in this video. And that's what I'm going to be picking up with here. Enjoy. One of the biggest secrets to Damascus steel is that the time that you spend preparing the steel is really what sets you up for success later on. One of the ways you can do this is by cleaning all the surfaces with a grinder, and then before I do the actual weld, I will clean them with acetone, and that wipes down all the oils that are accumulated on the surface. Something that I always had issues with is that when I would watch videos of guys making steel, they would just kind of use, haphazardly clean steel, and then they just throw a bunch of borax on it, and somehow it got it to weld. That misled me to believe that I could do the same thing. The reality is it's much more consistent if you always have clean steel when you go into that weld. I think it's really important to note here that this technique that I'm using in this video is called tile welding. And essentially that's where you create some abnormally shaped tiles or geometric shaped tiles and fit them together in a way so that whenever you forge weld them, make this really very geometric pattern. This technique is something that I learned first from Jamie Wendell of Dragon's Breath Forge. I recently attended the New England School of Metalwork where he taught a class and he discussed a lot of the sort of theories and design choices that he uses, and really just amazing maker. And I've never tried tile welding in this manner before. I've done mosaics before, and I have technically tile welded, but I've only ever gone vertical, or the fairy foot method as a lot of people know it as, where this is like a completely different technique that's foreign to me. So just individually, again, taking my time here because you want to make sure that everything is nice and clean before you go into the weld. Alright, so while that's heating up, what I'm going to do now is talk about the next pattern that I'm going to be doing, which is a twisted mosaic. Now what this is a billet that I four-weight, a very basic pattern. Essentially it was just a biased billet that had little stripes in it. It's what a lot of smiths would call a basket weave pattern. Well, I could take this and four-weight it again, which would look pretty neat, or I could take it and twist it. I love twist patterns as they tend to be one of those organic patterns you can achieve pretty quickly. When we get this in the forge, I'm going to knock the corners down so it's no longer square, and then I'm going to twist it in the press. Now the goal is to work this steel at a very high temperature. You need to work it at forge welding temperatures or it won't forge weld. Makes sense. The problem is that a lot of guys let their steel get way too cold, especially if you're on a press, and that puts a lot of strain on those welds that aren't fully set yet. And take your time, just slowly squish it down and make sure that weld is nice and good. It's like bubbling over. That's the sheet metal doing that, which is good. I don't want it to stick. You see, everything looks good and feels good under the hammer, but I won't know until I grind off that outer casing that is holding everything nice and tight. Then we can see if there's delamination. the press in order to do this pattern. That's something to keep in mind. It's very important that you scrape off all the scale that's being produced as we twist it. If you don't, you're more likely to have cold shuts. After this, I'll sprinkle some borax on the billet to almost act as a flux to hopefully aid in the forge welding process. Another really important thing to mention is that as we're twisting it, you want to make sure you have a nice even twist. Right there you can see it's really twisted tightly, where down here it's not. And so the way you fix that is you put the part that isn't as twisted under the main heat of the forge while the rest doesn't get as hot. That then by nature will twist faster than the tight spot. So that's what we're gonna do next, try to even it out. So I am really happy with how even that twist is for the central part of the bar. Now what we're gonna do is throw a little bit more flux on it, and then I'm gonna go to the press and press everything nice and flat. That'll forge weld it all together and get us our bar of usable steel. Ultimately, the first secret of Damascus is having good, clean steel. How you get clean steel is purely up to you. A lot of guys will use flux to try to get rid of that oxidation between layers. I am a big advocate though for preventing it altogether and making sure you have good, clean steel before you even start welding. Again, that you can simply grind your pieces nice and shiny, for lack of better terms, and then make sure they're all clean of oils using acetone or some other dissolvent. The next tip I wanted to bring up is that you want to make sure that you forge at hot temperatures. Again, very, very important, as Damascus steel tends to be a very temperamental material when you're forging it and heat treating it especially. So you want to make sure that you're working it at a very high temperature all the time. Don't hit it cold. If you do, you're putting a lot of stress on those welds that you just created. At the end of the day though, this all just comes from my experience. You might have a different experience with it. I would appreciate hearing that down in the comments. The other thing is that there really isn't a one answer to a lot of the different problems you'll face with Damascus. There's a lot of different avenues that you can take in order to get good, clean, successful forge welds and in order to have a good blade. So really, again, it just boils down to your experience and being able to learn despite having forge welds that might not stick. Being able to learn from that and come back the next time and make it work really is kind of the name of the game. Again, I am always learning. I really can't say that I have it figured out. The only thing I can say is that I've had successful forge welds, and the things that I've just listed are kind of the biggest sort of factors that I've found that play the biggest role in making Damascus. All right, let's go ahead and grind the mosaic billet first, see how the tile welding did. All right, so for those that don't know, ferric chloride is something that you can buy. It's a chemical that etches steel. Usually it's used to reveal Damascus patterns. I use it to reveal my hamones on my Japanese blades. But we're gonna go ahead and dip this billet in here and see what she looks like. Oh, didn't know we were quenching it. Oh, that's a chemical smell. Oh my gosh. As far as I'm aware, this is a successful forge weld. So the really kind of telltale moment will be once I start to hammer on it. We'll see how it reacts under the hammer, and if it splits apart on me, obviously that was no good. But I'm pretty happy with how it looks so far. So now we're gonna move away from this one and start to work on that one. Let's go ahead and grind it and etch it. All right, so the twist pattern has now been etched. It has this really bold pattern, which is what I was hoping for. Now the cool thing about twist Damascus is that as you grind deeper into the billet, the pattern begins to change and become a lot more organic and sort of bold and almost fiery is what I'm hoping for when I grind into this. That won't happen though until I forge out my blanks for my blades, but I think it's worth noting that From here, it looks like everything forge welded pretty nicely. There's no sort of cool cuts, there's no sort of delaminations or anything that's going to cause problems later on.